Welcome to The Defiant. I'm your host, Tegan Klein. Today, we are joined by Erick Calderon, founder of Art Blocks, but you may know him as Snowfro. Erick is not only an exceptionally talented artist, but also a tech innovator and entrepreneur who has redefined the limits of artistic expression in the digital era. Today, we get into how Art Blocks fosters creativity and community via the platform, how they differ from other projects. Erick shares his views on why you should even buy art in the first place, as well as his passion around generative art, as well as why he's passionate about decentralization. We get into his views on the NFT market fluctuations, and he shares a bit about the community of curators that are curating art on Art Blocks and how you can get involved there. But first, Erick, you are definitely a crypto OG that saw NFTs before almost anyone. Can you start by telling us your crypto origin story and about your early involvement in the CryptoPunks community?
CryptoPunk specifically, that was kind of my on-ramp into an NFT. I discovered it through Reddit, through a link on the R-ETH dev or R Ethereum, one of the two. I remember I joined Discord as a result of wanting to talk to other people that were weird enough to collect these things at the same time. And that kind of became the trajectory for the next 6 years of just being very connected to the digital world before, during, and after the pandemic.
Amazing. And I bought my CryptoPunk at the height of the bull market. So tell me, how did you see it so early?
Well, it wasn't a financial decision. I think that's part of it. I was into generative art, and I've been into generative art for a long time. And so I saw this as a really beautiful work of generative art. And then I was also excited and eager to use any form of crypto technology. Anything that I could use my Ethereum for, I did, literally, like every single app that existed. And this was just one of them. And this is the one, though, that really got me thinking and triggered my excitement for the future.
And tell us about the passion for generative art. Where does it come from? Why are you so excited about it?
I've been following a lot of the generative artists that have been around for a long time, for a while. And I originally actually started, I didn't even understand the concept of generative. I've been kind of a hobby coder my whole life, but not really serious or a professional by any means. But I started creating an artwork form using technology called projection mapping, which there was some software out on the market that did what I wanted it to do, but not quite exactly how I wanted it to do it. So eventually I figured that I had to program it myself. And so whether it was within one of the programs that allowed scripting and then eventually just scripting from scratch, I got to a point where I was writing code that generated a visual output. I would still have called it algorithmic art up until that part, or even parametric art, in that I was using sliders to control the visual outputs and to the beat, until a little bit later into that I added a button that it was the randomize button. And so if you hit that button, everything just kind of changed and it kind of randomized at the same time. And that is, I think, where my love and appreciation for generative art really came from, this moment of on-demand generative creation where the person creating it doesn't have to understand all of the intricacies, but can understand that A, they like it, and B, they want to participate in the creation of it. So ever since then, it's been, following these amazing artists that were making this type of work well before there was a path to monetization, well before there was any money to be made in generative art, or very little money to be made. These people were just really passionate about creating visual stuff with code, eventually leading to this point where Art Blocks became a place for people to release generative art under this new technology.
Amazing. And can you tell us a little bit about the founder story of Art Blocks and the inspiration that came?
Art Blocks was thought of the moment that I was claiming my CryptoPunks. So that was the first time that I ever considered the concept of Art Blocks, in that I was able to claim the punks that I wanted to claim, which was the rarer punks. And I felt with my experience up until that point with the blockchain, that there was enough entropy in the blockchain so that I would, instead of getting to pick the green ones, the zombies, I would click claim, and based on whatever the probability was of getting that, I would just get a punk. And if it was green, great, it got lucky. So that moment of feeling kind of selfish or greedy, of claiming a lot of the green punks, it made me realize that the technology could facilitate more than that. And then that, coupled with the years of spending time behind a computer and writing code that generated random algorithmic outputs, and then just the fascination with NFTs in general. Slowly, from then, led to what you eventually see as Art Blocks, that was launched in 2020 as a platform for artists to store deterministic, resolution agnostic art on the Ethereum blockchain in a way that I think truly demonstrates what the opportunity is for using the blockchain for art purposes. It kind of represents the most kind of native, I guess, way of utilizing blockchain technology to store information that can generate visual and audio outputs.
Erick, can you double click into how Art Blocks works? So how artists are generally interacting, what role Art Blocks plays in curation, and how users mint NFTs?
Yeah, so the Art Blocks minting process is a little bit different than the typical NFT is minted, in that generally an NFT is created by the artists themselves. And so they mint the NFT with a pointer towards the artwork. And then they take the step to list it on a marketplace. So they either mint it and list it within that same marketplace, or they mint it one place and then they list it on another. With Art Blocks, we actually are really excited about this idea that we're cutting out multiple steps in exchange for enabling an artist to distribute their work to a broader audience in a novel way. And so the Art Blocks artist actually uploads their algorithm that they've worked on, that they've crafted, that they've given up control over, in that they are uploading an algorithm that they feel confident has the variability and also the constraints that they would feel represents the work no matter what comes out, because they don't know exactly what's going to come out of the algorithm. And so they upload that algorithm on chain, and then the Art Blocks team spends quite a bit of time vetting each project to make sure that it's resolution agnostic, which means that it will continue to scale up to any screen resolution in the future. As technology improves, the artwork will scale up with it, which is something pretty novel in the art world in general. And also that it's deterministic, which means that every time you mint something, anytime you watch or you look at your token, you're going to see the exact same thing every time. So that is your artwork. The artist also sets an edition size. And so what makes things a little bit different on Art Blocks is the collector comes and actually triggers the execution of the smart contract to mint the token that did not previously exist. And the moment that they mint that token, they're also minting along with that token some randomness, some entropy. That randomness mixed with the information stored on the smart contract of the algorithm is what generates the unique output for that generative artwork. And so the algorithm lives on the blockchain one time, can scale to any resolution. The randomness is the only thing that needs to be different, actually, from token to token. That is minted at the time of minting, at the time of creation. And the two are combined together to create a visual output that is unique to that user. And at that point, it's just a token. It's a sovereign bearer NFT, which means that there is no external control or forces or factors that can be applied to it. And all the information, or most of it, depending on which library is used, needed to generate that algorithm is also stored on chain. In terms of curation, Art Blocks has multiple different kind of levels of curation. Right now, it's been reduced. It used to be 3. We used to have the curated, playground, and factory. Now we have curated and presents. The idea here is that in artwork, there is so much generative art. We get input all the time that Art Blocks and other platforms in a similar vein have kind of inspired a lot of people that are coders into being creative coders, into kind of having this like creative artistic side, which is really beautiful. And all that art is kind of coming out of from a much larger audience than we had before. And what Art Blocks is committed to doing is to identifying the pieces of art that are as much as possible raising the bar, doing something innovative, whether it's in the way they speak of their art, in the message they're trying to send, whether it's technical innovation, whether it's like a combination of all of those things. And those are the projects that we're putting forward on Art Blocks as either presents or curated. The curation board on Art Blocks, which is a group of individuals that essentially evaluates every project and provides very thorough and meaningful feedback for the artists, decides which ones from those to pick to elevate to a curated status. The curated projects happen significantly less often than the presents projects. And we're just moving towards this world where There's so much optionality for artists to release generative art, which is beautiful. I mean, the fact that if you would have said a few years ago that you would have, at this point, 20, 25 competing generative art releasing platforms in the world, like I would have been like, yeah, you're crazy. But like at this point, we are now at that point where there's optionality for people to reduce work. And what Artblocks does that a lot of other platforms do not do is take extra care with every single drop in every single algorithm. That eventually becomes the value proposition of Artblocks, is curation, attention to detail, as the concept of minting generative art, whether it's IPFS based or on-chain generative art, is homogenized across 25 platforms that do the same thing. So we're out here to essentially provide to our collectors the best that we can get in front of them, generative art from the best generative artists in the world. And I think that we've been very lucky to get some of the best people in the past. And we would strive to get to work with some of the best generative artists of the future. So we'll see where that takes us. But in the meantime, it's always a struggle in Web3 to kind of balance and try to figure out what's best for the artists, for the collectors, for all the stakeholders. And it's been a navigation that I was not expecting. And we've learned a lot along the way. We'll continue to learn as we move forward.
Absolutely. And I want to double click into two pieces there. First, just on the culture of the artists on Artblocks compared to other platforms. I imagine it's a little bit different, right? Because you're giving away control to the users. Yes, you're setting parameters, but can you maybe talk about the culture of the artist compared to other projects?
Well, it's hard to compare to other platforms. A lot of platforms are using the same methodology, which is the on-demand generative minting concept, which means the algorithm is in place, but the output is unknown. Other ones are using pre-selected outputs, which has a ton of value in and of itself as well. I mean, some artists can craft the most stunning algorithm, but not love every single output and be willing to sacrifice, let's say, the on-chain nature of the work in exchange for making sure that every single one of the outputs meets their criteria for a beautiful piece. Where I think the culture is maybe a little bit different is that and I think this is complex and I think it's just kind of hard to understand, is that there's always, kind of like an indie vibe in the generative art world, and Artblocks has kind of, it was originally intended to be this open platform for everybody to release on. That was the original goal, and we are taking steps to make it more accessible and more available for people to release on our technology. But as a result of like the incredible caliber of art that ended up being released on Artblocks, we have lost that indie nature and really just kind of focused on a more exclusive nature, which is quite not my personal nature as someone that always kind of is concerned about inclusivity. But at the same time, it's like you're between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, you want to recognize the incredible work that's on the platform and make sure that you protect and elevate that with more great art. On the other hand, you want to let anybody release anything, but that can lead to, it's just two completely different paths. And the path that we chose, often based on, probably because in 2021, it's like anything that was released would sell out because it was just kind of like nobody really understood what was going on. It was the 2021 bull run. And, opening it up even further was complex in that it felt dilutive, and it just, this is the path that we chose, and we love the path that we're on. This path enables us to work with a wonderful artistic director that comes from the contemporary art world that can speak to artists about their message and what they're doing, and our incredible art team that spends time one-on-one with every single artist and walks them through the process and gets them to the finish line and gives them motivation at the time of minting and mint zero. And so it's a very different experience, I think, releasing on Artblocks as it is on releasing on other platforms. And as someone that likes to explore, I see that there's benefits to all of the different methodologies. And I actually encourage artists to have experiences. I always refer to this as like the circuit. You should not be concerned with trying something else out and going and putting your work in as many different hands as possible, because I think if the beauty of what Artblocks, one of the most powerful parts of Artblocks is the distribution mechanism of the work, then ultimately the goal might be to get the work into as many people's hands more than to get the amount of revenue that you think you deserve for that work. because this is Web3. This is about community and dialogue. What happens after the mint is just as important as what happens before and during the mint. And being able to have that dialogue with the most people would be a metric of success for me. And what that means is just making sure that you release it in a way that really celebrates the distribution mechanism that allows you to release something to 10,000 people by uploading 35 lines of code in 2021 without touching it again since.
Absolutely. And it's a great way to build community with, the collectors of the art. And the other question I wanted to ask was just on the curation side. So are the curators full-time with Art Blocks? Are those community members? And for those listening, if they have an interest or passion in curating art, how could they get involved?
Well, so look, the last couple of years have been a complete roller coaster. And one of the things that I've felt is that it's really important to kind of keep a vision of what we're here to do, which is to, in this case, get to work or create the opportunity to work with the best generative artists in the world. And to do that, you have to be able to give them really good feedback too on curation processes. And there was a time I've been really interested in having community members be part of the curation board for a while, but there's all sorts of complexities, including just simply bandwidth, like just our ability to be able to add curatorial board members. We weren't able to revise the curation board until earlier in the year, or was it the end of last year? It was the end of last year, and then it just continues to evolve since then. These are not full-time Art Blocks team members. These are curatorial board members. They receive a honorarium for every quarter that they serve on the board, and they have very strict rules that they have to abide by. And what I'm really excited to say is that as of yesterday, we announced the beginning of allowing community members to apply to the Art Blocks curation board. Because, as silly as this sounds, and in 2021, if the Art Blocks curation board was governed by the community, and the community was getting really excited about PFP projects, let's say, just like all the things in the metaverse, the Bored Apes, and all the there's so many really wonderful projects out there. But Art Blocks is not necessarily meant to be. Well, there's actually been really wonderful PFP type projects on Art Blocks. Art Blocks is meant to have a message and to be focused on art for the sake of art itself. Buy what you like from artists that you want to see succeed, as the great Art Gnome has said in earlier posts. What if the community curation in 2021 curated a bunch of PFP projects? Because that's what we were into. Even I was part of that. We were all excited about that. We really wanted to set the tone, especially at a time when projects were selling out for really large amounts of money, that we were interested and curious to see what the art, what the feedback was from art people that have a history in the arts and understanding of the arts. So as of now, we've finally gotten ourselves together in a place where we have the bandwidth to really draft a community curation seat process. And part of that process is scary, right? The community curators have access to upcoming projects. Front running is an issue in the NFT ecosystem. It's been an issue in the past. So, can you have some anonymous person be on the community curation board? No. Right? You just can't. They can be anonymous to the public, but we have to be able to hold someone accountable if someone on the curation board gets access to something and buys something that they shouldn't have. And so that's just one example of how critical this seat is and how sensitive this seat is and how difficult it was to get to this point where we can have community curation. But now we have a contract and an agreement, and they may not have to dox themselves to the community, but they have to dox themselves to us because we have to be able to hold people accountable. And in exchange for that, right now our honorarium is 1 ETH per quarter, and they spend 1-2 hours a week going through the projects and deciding which ones are curated. And I think having a little bit of the community voice into the curation process would actually be a really positive thing, in that our community is what got us to where we are today. And our community is the reason that Art Blocks is faring a little bit better than a lot of the NFT projects out there. And it's based on a very resolute vision of buy art because you like it, period. And I think the community, which initially we were crucified for suggesting that, and that has very much kind of come around to being actually accepted. I remember I would say that in Discord, and people would be like, come on, you're delusional if you think if anybody's actually buying art because they care about the art of the artist. And now we're looking at a meta where it seems that people seem to be curious about the artist, about their career, about the future of generative art, about the future of digital art. And that is creating a new group of people interested in art in the world that are defining the next generation of art appreciators in the world. In my opinion, I might be like over indexing on that, but so the new community curation board seats will be done. We made an announcement on Twitter, and we would love to see what people say. I think there's a really interesting way of applying. And then the original ones, a lot of them were just like who I was around when I first launched Art Blocks. And then little by little identifying people that we thought would be really interesting to have their voice in the decision of curating. And there's been in the Web3 space, we are faced with very difficult gender diversity issues, just by the pure nature of crypto. Unfortunately, by the pure nature of coding and being a coder and understanding this type of stuff, or not understanding, but getting involved or having the curiosity even get into this kind of stuff, we have a pretty significant gender imbalance, and it's starting to mirror the traditional art world. And one of the things I like to say often is while we may not have the solution and we may not actually be the people that fix it, not making an attempt is a huge missed opportunity. And one thing that we actually took a serious amount of time last year is to think through, who are the voices on the curation board and who do they represent, and making sure that we started by kind of working towards a more diverse curation board in terms of gender. And then I think another one that we have to tackle soon is more of a cultural diversity. It's crypto oftentimes and art oftentimes is just a bunch of white dudes, and that feels like a huge opportunity for us to diversify and for us to help that. It's not easy. Anyone that says it's easy is, it's hard and it's complex, and there's a lot of feelings and a lot of emotions, but we're making efforts as we can to kind of approach these things one at a time, and hopefully, over the course of the next year, we see, a really well-defined curation board that includes cultural representation from all over the world.
So here's something new. Bumper your assets to defend them from price drops without losing upside exposure. You set a price floor and term length, then lock your tokens into the protocol. When your term ends, if the price has fallen under your floor, you leave with stablecoins at the floor's value. Otherwise, you just take back your original asset. Bumper is going live in August, and it's one of the most innovative DeFi protocols for hedging being built right now. So check out bumper.fi, there's links in the description of this video.
Congratulations on the launch of the community members. That's super exciting. And I want to kind of double click into the technical piece. So how NFTs are represented on chain. So the code, from what I understand, the code for generating the piece is committed on chain, but the images themselves are not, and usually that's HTTP Correct. Or IPFS or Arweave in some cases.
Right. Well, the images are just if the whole world operated on Art Blocks technology, let's say, and this is complex because it could melt a computer by trying to process too many images. But the images exist because the infrastructure for marketplaces is reliant on an image, generally for thumbnails, for scrolling through projects. And if they weren't thumbnails, if they were live algorithms and you had 10 live algorithms running in your browser, it would probably overheat your computer and shut down. And so the images are stored on a server because the algorithm has all the information necessary to reproduce that image on demand. And so if you open up an Art Blocks algorithm, even, for example, I think one that I really like to use as an example is ringers, right? You can view ringers two ways. You can view them as the code generating in your browser, or you can view it as an image that was pre-generated and rendered and stored on a server. The code generated in the browser, most, if not all, of that information is available widely now in Web3 on-chain. Viewing the two are identical. Pixel to pixel, if you have both open, they look identical. Something to me, and this is the nerdy nature, and hopefully I'm little by little, we're spreading that level of nerdiness to the broader audience. The idea that I could stare at a ringers and I know that it's actually being algorithmically, what I'm looking at was created algorithmically and is running live in the browser, even if it looks identical to the image of the ringers that's next to it, I am drawn from a technological perspective to the thing that's being rendered in the browser. And I think that's so powerful and interesting, because of what I said earlier. We had an experience at the Samsung headquarters in New York where A lot of the concepts of resolution agnosticism, I thought, might be looked at as like unnecessary until we see massive increases in resolution. And do we even want like 16K screens? Because I can't tell the difference between my 4K screen and my 8K screen anyways. But we had this opportunity in Samsung in New York at the Samsung headquarters where they allowed us to show ArtBlocks artworks on a 3-story tall screen. And that 3-story tall screen is significantly higher resolution in terms of the number of pixels of height and width than a typical computer screen. And we were able to not have to upsample that artwork in order to show it on the screen. We were able to match the pixels to that screen. And the difference is striking to the point where you walk into the Samsung building and you know what every ArtBlocks artworks looks like at this point, because we have a community of like people that just, they follow our product and they follow the artworks, etc. And you see it at that scale and at that resolution for the first time. And once again, you're surprised and excited and invigorated about this concept of on-chain generative art because of the ability to reproduce at the larger scale, pixel by pixel. That's just one of those technical qualities of it being on chain. And so even though when you're looking at it on your screen and it's just being rendered live in the browser and it looks like a static image, the fact that all that information is coming together from blockchain data to be able to like recreate the piece is it's just a new way of having dialogue with art. It makes it a performance art piece in a very weird way. The way that people buy it as a birth of the artwork in front of the artist and the collector at the exact same time. There's just so many different layers to this that really make this like a unique experience and something that I think I would just love to see more people participate in.
Amazing. I love that perspective. And why are you passionate about the blockchain industry? Why are you passionate about decentralization?
Oh, for so many reasons. I mean, I think the number one reason is just like having full transparency of what's happening with my stuff. Of course, you don't know what's happening with everything else in the world. Entering a time where I have less and less trust for the information that's being presented to me, just because of the the pure and sheer level of divisiveness within our country and within the world these days, and being able to stare at something with just absolute fact and certainty of its accuracy is something maybe we take for granted within our lives, but it's something we're not offered in any other aspect of our lives, right? It's like you go take your car into the shop and they're pulling up on your screen and they're looking, and you try to look at the screen like, oh, sorry, this is private. It's like, well, what is in my service records that I'm not even allowed to see? There's something really powerful about all this information being on the blockchain. And then the ability to natively store artwork on the blockchain, to me, feels like a killer use case for, not the killer use case. There's going to be many killer use cases for blockchain technology, but the ability to natively and nascently put artwork that can be scaled to any device on the blockchain in a way that it feels immutable, permanent, self-sovereign, meaning it's air-gapped, there's no external interaction with it. It just feels like a perfect fit. Like it's a product market fit that I think a lot of times we seek in innovation. And you couple that with like the distribution mechanisms. This technology facilitates generative arts distribution in a way that was not possible before. Generative art has existed for decades. If you start looking back into the history of generative art, it's like just trying to put yourself in these people's brains in the 1960s, entering these cold rooms without even a computer screen, just a keyboard, without even like a direct output, wanting to test out what the boundaries are of algorithmic variability, and seeing that went for 60 so years in a slowly evolving way where technology made it more three-dimensional or more easy, with the advent of like processing in P5.js, more compatible by being able to run it in the browser. Like there's a lot of things that have happened along the way. And then this ability for the artist, maybe for the first time in a long time, to be able to monetize this like passion and effort was facilitated by blockchain technology. And to all the haters out there of blockchain technology, because I know that there are, and I see some of these tweets and it really makes me I feel some of these are very genuine and some of them are very disingenuous. I don't care about a lot of the other things. I feel very confident to say objectively that this technology facilitates this what started as a nerdy hobby into being a more mainstream, understandable and acceptable form of art. And that alone makes me very bullish on blockchain technology. And that doesn't even touch on decentralized finance and all the other killer use cases of the technology.
Amazing. Yeah, I can feel your passion coming through, and you have to give credit where credit's due, because a lot of projects do this decentralization theater, and you guys not only are building on the blockchain tech stack, but you also were one of the first projects that migrated to the Graph's decentralized network. I think actually Art Blocks was the first NFT project that moved to the Graph's decentralized network. So very much an early adopter of decentralizing that data layer. So yeah, appreciate you walking the walk.
My teammates at Art Blocks are really incredible and very intelligent people. They're also lovely to work with, and they have been just huge supporters of the Graph since the very beginning. And all the credit goes to them for really identifying what they saw as like the future of indexing, and like what, especially once things became more stable and more, they really identified early on. They really were forward seeing, and like that this was the way to do things. And I just have to give them entirely all of the credit for that. Working with them has been such a dream over the last couple of years.
Amazing. And credit to yourself too for building such an incredible team. And you alluded to the roller coaster that is the NFT space, that is crypto. Can you talk to us a little bit about maybe the major signposts in the last 3 years? What surprised you? What shocked you?
What surprised? I mean, everything has surprised and shocked me. Everything. Like the good things and the bad things. Like the good things when somebody says and does something like where I'm just like, holy crap, that person, like this is the kind of person that we want in this ecosystem. This is the person that I want to be like. This is the person that I want to align with. This is the person that's going to change the status quo in the art world. This is the person, I'll give you one example. Patrick Amidon, who, kind of stood up for he was part of a show that didn't include any women, and he was like, this is interesting. Like, there's this opportunity, and we are missing this opportunity. So let's try to do what we can to make a change. And so people like that really are not sacrificing their integrity and not sacrificing their ideals and their morals in order to make this, oversimplifying, make this world a better place. And I do think that art can make the world a better place. One of my favorite artists, JR, has a book. It's like, Can Art Change the World? And I absolutely think that it can. By putting art into the hands of more people, I think that we have a better chance of art changing the world and being influential and having an impact and being an on-ramp to culture, which is something I shared at a panel the other day. But yeah, everything has been completely shocking. Everything from the massive sellouts at Art Blocks in the past to some of the, like, for example, some of my favorite poet-based artists that have an open project on Art Blocks today that I think is just like, is the community, where's the misalignment with the community where there's like this beautiful open curated project on Art Blocks that hasn't sold out yet, that like to me is representative of like the most beautiful parts of our ecosystem. And so everything is a shock, everything is a surprise. We are just kind of managing it as we go. Every single one of us is learning every day. We are writing the playbook. Anyone that like thinks that they know in advance of what's supposed to be happening is wrong. And I think we should be careful of anyone that states with conviction that they know what is about to happen. When I started Art Blocks, I didn't think of it as writing a playbook. I thought I was just like expressing myself as a hobby. And as someone that has been a business owner for nearly 20 years prior, writing a playbook is the hardest thing I've ever done. Running a business is very difficult, and I'm definitely not a great operational CEO and have a lot to learn with that respect. But when you're in a business where like everything is novel, everything is new, everything is changing, everything changes at a very quick pace, it's just so hard. And like all these things are curveballs. Everything good and bad, even the good stuff, is a curveball and making you rethink. And if you're not willing to adapt and rethink and like embrace the change, you end up getting in a weird spot where it's just harder to get out of bed in the morning because you don't really realize like what brought you here in the first place, which is like the future promise of like decentralization and like on-chain art, et cetera. So anyways, I'm rambling, but yeah, everything has just kind of been a shocking surprise, and it continues to be. So in fact, I think that'll be the day where we've maybe, we used to say in the crypto space, like, going to make it. Like the day where I go a whole day without being utterly shocked by the events that happened within our ecosystem will be the beginning of a trajectory of potentially having made it, right? Homeostasis, I know this drives people crazy, but homeostasis is the goal here. We're nowhere near that. So we need homeostasis. So let's get there. And it might be 2 years and it might be 25 years. I don't know. But that is, that's when things won't be so shocking anymore and when we'll actually make some real progress in like getting this into the world.
Totally. I love that. And also on the everything changing, I think as long as you have a clear direction and mission, you can roll with the punches, you can pivot, but it's not hopping on trends, right? It's sticking to that mission and the passion. And it sounds like you're doing that.
Yeah. Not chasing the shiny objects, which it's hard. I have to admit, it's like very hard not to chase shiny things in crypto, but we have to have discipline. Like that's I think partly why we're still here today.
Absolutely. And I think I know what you're going to say to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And I am learning how to just get art that I like, right? It's like one of my friends told me that if you're trying to match the art to your room, you're doing it wrong. Like you pick art that you love and you put it up, or you put it in your wallet, I guess. So when you walk into a gallery, there's kind of this sense of provenance that, that can be lost. And sometimes it's difficult to evaluate. And sometimes it can even be intimidating because there's this information asymmetry. So what do you think makes generative art on the blockchain different than this? Do you think it's maybe less intimidating and more welcoming?
Yeah, I think the blockchain is already less intimidating, I think, than the traditional art world was for me before all of this. Now it's just very much changed, the reception in the traditional art world for what we've built at Artblocks is just completely mind-blowing, and it's changed perspectives. And part of that I think is just understanding that it's not going to be all crypto all the way, it's not going to be all traditional art world all the way. There will be a synthesis of how both worlds operated, and that will be the final result. Whether it weighs more into crypto aesthetics and ideals or traditional art world, only time will tell. But there's something about the process. I've told this anecdote in the past, but when I was creating pieces in projection mapping world, I was using an iPad to control, using little sliders, what you would see on the wall. And what that's essentially is called parametric art or parametric design. Architects have been using that for a really long time to help make buildings and to kind of design funky, wavy shapes in buildings. Generative art is when you take parametric art and you randomly assign the location of each of those sliders into something that feels random. And in the world of projection mapping, I would be throwing it, there'd be an event, and I would hand people that were partying or having a good time an iPad and be like, okay, you control it. And they would look at all these things, and they saw the screen. The projection piece would be 30 feet wide. It's larger than life. Very few times in our lives do we have the ability to directly control something that is that large and affects and impacts that many people. And so giving someone the iPad to do that terrified them. Partly because they didn't know what they were doing with the sliders, partly because of this concept of taste, right? Like some people have bad taste, some people have good taste, but some people don't have taste. And I think that's okay. And I think that's our job potentially, is to help people, because once you have taste, it's like going from black and white television to color. Like it just opens the world of possibilities of what how you look at things and how you think of things and how you make decisions. And I think this really wonderful stepping stone towards that is this concept that with that iPad, I eventually got frustrated with people kind of not wanting to touch it, so I added a new screen on the iPad, and it was a big red button. And so somebody would come in and they'd mash the big red button, and it randomized everything. And so they would press the button, but they didn't have aesthetic control. All they had control over was a binary yes or no, I'm not controlling it. So they would hit the button, and the 30-foot screen would explode, and it would change colors, and they would be like, oh, that's awesome. Did you see mine was yellow? Whatever it might be. And there would actually be dialogue amongst the group of people and being like, hey, did you see when I pressed the button? To me, that's part of the core tenet of what Artblocks is doing, is this moment of on-demand generative minting where you and the artist are giving up control of what's going to come out of it, but you know what to expect within a certain set of boundaries. And the artist sets those boundaries. When you see mint 0 on the platform, you don't even understand the boundaries. When you see mint 1 through 10, you start to understand the boundaries. When you see mint 1 through 100, you really get a good idea for what the boundaries are of that artwork. And so the more artworks that exist, the more of an understanding of what the potential can be of that artwork. there's something kind of powerful about that, because someone's not making an aesthetic decision. They're making an aesthetic decision as to wanting to participate in the project itself, but not in the individual output that they're going to get. And I feel that my taste has been refined through the process of contemplating what I'm getting when I receive an artwork. And I now know that, for example, the color purple is one that I don't prefer as much as the color red or blue. Yellow is my favorite color, so that was always been easy. Or algorithms that have like a dark background with like little spots of color or something that like makes me smile and like makes my taste sensors tingle. And like I think that there's this way of communicating that to a new audience by removing their requirement to make an aesthetic decision, something that oftentimes we feel judged by, the aesthetic decisions that we make. But instead, when there's a project and there's 1,000 mints and there's 1,000 people in that community and everybody comes together to mint it, they're all sharing the decision to participate in it, but they're not being judged on what their particular output was, because they didn't actually have control over that. And what they can do is they can then say, hey, I really like the yellow one, and so they can trade a purple one for a yellow one with another user that prefers purple. And what that does is that augments the dialogue. It creates a whole different conversation than what it would have been like to collect something where everything's identical, or what it would have been like to collect something in an isolated gallery where you collected a piece and you know that other people collected similar pieces, but we don't know what they look like or who they are or where they live or if they're even open for a conversation. This technology has like hyper elevated the transaction of information and also artwork in a way that enables us to kind of have a more ongoing dialogue over the art. So it's just such a different experience. And I think Artblocks takes it to that slightly higher level than what non-generative work does, and that everybody has something that's unique to them. I believe humans are attracted to individuality, and this platform and this technology enables a expression of individuality in a way that we hadn't really kind of facilitated before.
Super interesting. And I guess on the topic of taste, and maybe this is too philosophical, but what is taste and how could someone not have it? Because if you hype something enough, does it then become tasteful?
Well, it depends on if you're hyping something because you promise people they're going to make money on it, or if you hype something because you're expressing a desire to own it as something that's like beautiful art on your wall. I feel like I went through a transition in my life where I went from maybe saying not having taste is not the right word, maybe being indifferent to taste. There were some things in my life that I had very strong conviction on. I loved modern architecture. I loved the color yellow. I liked German engineering. But there was a lot of things that I could just care less about. And what I've realized through this journey over the last 20 years of like also making art prior to Artblocks and like being in the ceramic tile world where, curating like tiles for what we sell in the company was an important concept. I realized that I've developed a sense of taste. And maybe what that means is conviction in what I want and what I like and what appeals to me, and pride in sharing what I like with other people and not being afraid to express that to other people. Because I don't really know what taste is besides that, other than just having an opinion, having a preference. And I think, I've read this book called The $12 Million Stuffed Shark, which, gosh, it's such an old book. And I think to most people in the traditional art world, they just find it so shallow that was like my formative book about understanding the traditional art world. But like that book essentially talks about the branded collector, the branded artist, and the branded gallery, and the idea that like the gallery was the tastemaker. The collectors would come in and they wouldn't know what to buy. They just wanted to participate oftentimes in art, and they didn't even know whether they wanted to show off to their friends, and so they were asking which one's the biggest flex, or because they really just wanted art for their home, but they were scared of making a decision that was going to lose value, or make a decision where like it would have been perceived as shallow, whatever it might be. And the gallery would help you with that process. That the gallery would walk you through and be the tastemaker and the one that would help you develop a sense of taste. And I think that the same thing is kind of happening with NFTs. I think you have the world of digital art, which is just one of many use cases of NFTs, is facilitating a broader group of people to develop a sense of taste, which means could be as simple as like, do you prefer Bored Apes or CryptoPunks, and why? And not just like because one value goes up, but like this one speaks my language, this one I resonate with, to understanding the nuances between different outputs within the same algorithm in order to make a decision on buying a $5,000 to $10,000 piece of algorithmic art based on small nuanced differences in what the algorithm produces, and then everything in between. I think that we are facilitating, by doing this behind a PFP, which a lot of people start pseudonymously in the NFT space, by doing this from the comfort of our home, by doing this in a way where, we are creating an on-ramp for people to feel confident and comfortable. And this is not just art blocks, this is just like the digital art space in general, and develop a sense of taste and develop a compassion for artists and an understanding for artists' careers and a desire to like elevate and promote the medium because they see that there's beauty and value inside of it.
Amazing. And I guess it's maybe a little controversial, but which NFT projects do you think were only existed because they wanted to make money off of the projects?
That's controversial. I think that many NFT projects started that way and then eventually found a community of people that were just truly like in love with the project. And I don't think it's wrong. I mean, artists are also trying to make money. It is okay to make money. Really where the problem lies is if someone is trying to make money deceptively. And I think one of the, it's like a double-edged sword. The transparency of the blockchain is brilliant in that it shows every little tiny mistake and rug that exists. But as a result of that, every single tiny rug and mistake becomes sensationalized in a way because we can see it. And oftentimes in the regulatory landscape, people say, "Oh yeah, people do bad things with crypto." I think the problem is that people get caught doing bad things in crypto because of the transparency. And I think that if we had the same transparency in everyday business and everyday politics, it would be significantly worse in the real world than it is in crypto in terms of like the scams and the rug pulls. And so when we identify projects that are here just to make money, I think it's okay. I think you have really good designers that have a really good head on their shoulder that are like, hey, this is a way that I can monetize my work. And it's less of an identification of projects that are here to make money, and more an identification of projects that are here to deceptively make money. And I think that's really where like the bad vibes come from more than anything. It's just unfortunate that is something that's prevalent within our ecosystem. But it's also something that, being here, being present, participating, being in Twitter spaces and dialogues, like you get to know the people that you can really, really trust. And look, decentralization is all about not trusting. But ultimately, at some point, somebody has to present something to you that you want to participate in. And you have to make sure that that thing you're participating in is more likely to have longevity. And that's going to be based on reputation. And reputation in the Web3 space is something that just evaporates in a heartbeat and actually somehow comes back in a heartbeat too. So, here we are having these cycles of like similar experiences as we've had in the past. So yeah, definitely not here to call out any projects that are here to make money. I encourage everybody to make as much money as they can, but to do it in an ethical way, in a way where you're not convincing someone to buy your thing because they're scared that someone else is going to buy it, but to buy your thing because they just love it and they want to be a part of it.
Very well said. Amazing. And I guess on that, should we chat a little bit about the NFT market? For a while, it looked like the NFT market kind of kept thriving despite the bear market in the crypto space. Do you think, what prompted that in your opinion? And do you think it was just kind of why do you think it continued on? And then why do you think it dropped?
To me, I think that there is a very objective transfer of value from technology to content. And what that means is that there was a time where people were really excited about the technology, and I was too, and I am still, of course, today. And people accrued more value to the technology than the content. And what happens is when you accrue a lot of value to technology, well, technology, part of what makes technology so great is its reproducibility. And so more people can do that same thing technologically. And more people do that same thing, and there's a dilution of that. What people cannot do the same thing of is create culture, create art. Like, yes, anybody can make art. Any 5-year-old could have made a squiggle. But what happens is over time, whether it's people's participation, message, the visual aesthetics, the technological efficacy of a creative code or whatever it might be, those things are demonstrated over time as being able to hold the dialogue. And that doesn't necessarily mean hold value, although there's often like a conflation of value and like participation. And so over time, the value has gone towards the content that is stored in the NFTs. And the NFT just being a simple method for storing a digital object in a way that enables someone to prove ownership of it for the first time in history. And as we have seen the value accrued to the technology migrate to the content, and we've seen that platforms that have and always will be here for the art for the sake of art itself, have seen significant transitions from technology to content, but not quite as significant transitions from value to content as other platforms. That it kind of was always just about the technology and how do you get as many things out there to as many people, et cetera. So I think that what's really changed and what's really helping people weather the market is this idea that to be a savvy collector in this ecosystem now, there's always going to be the hyper flipping because there's inefficiencies in the stock market. There's inefficiencies in every single market. And those people have a place here. And I think anyone that says that those people don't have a place here is a little misguided because the technology enables them to have a place here. And anything that we can't just like have our cake and eat it too. The technology does some really wonderful things, and it facilitates some other things. But what is important is understanding the difference between the hyper flipping, just literally trying to profit off of the inefficiencies of the market, and the collector, and sometimes known as the patron, that is actually following the life and the story and the interactions and the trajectory of the artist and forming their own opinion. Not just about what the future value of the piece can be, although that could very well be impacted by what I'm about to say, but to form an opinion as to whether they want to be a supporter and be on that journey with that artist, not today, but tomorrow and for the next 5, 10, 40, 60 years of that artist's lives. And we've seen that in the art world, that people can have met Andy Warhol at the age of 20 and followed the full art and career of the artists, and not just, just threw out a name of Andy Warhol, any artist, right? Like, it's like, that's happened, and like people can be fans of an artist for like a very extended period of time. And I think what people are realizing now as we shift from technology to content, it's not just the content of the artwork, but it's the content of what the artist has inside their soul and what they're here to contribute to and what they want to see change in the world. And it ends up with a bunch of people that are just cheering you on and giving you motivation to get out of bed in the morning. And then so you do more things and more thoughtful things and contribute in a more thoughtful way. And it kind of like snowballs into this thing that I've seen happen in a very short period amount of time for a lot of the artists that I follow in this ecosystem. And those artists today are thriving. No matter how bad the market is, like, those artists are thriving. And that is freaking awesome. And that gives me hope that there can be a future here within this ecosystem for the people that are sending the right message and that are sticking to their integrity and to sticking to their ideals. And while that can't happen for everybody, just for supply and demand issues, I think there's a big opportunity for a lot of people that are here today to be very well heard and recognized and participatory in the future of the digital art.
Absolutely. I love that. And I guess, not to be negative, but what do you think the AI impact will have on the art world itself?
I don't think it's negative at all. I love AI. I have AI helping me with a bunch of things in my life, from giving me suggestions on how to respond to my child when he's screaming at me at the top of his lungs, to helping me simplify code chunks to make it less likely to run into an error while for a generative art project. AI is a tool. Generative art is a medium, but it's also generative distribution using blockchain technology is a tool. AI art is a medium in some cases, in that the result is the end result, and it's a tool in other cases where the result is what facilitates the eventual end result. And I love that. And I think that, we are seeing a homogenization of art on so many different levels, at so many different scales, homogenization of generative art, of AI art, of just digital art in general. And anyone that fights AI is like fighting that homogenization, but that homogenization is coming. We are letting more people, more individual humans create and do things that 10 years ago they would have had to have a full degree to do, or would have had to have like some crazy manufacturing plant to do. We can now do with a 3D printer in our own home. We can now do because YouTube teaches us to do this. There's going to be a homogenization of every single thing that we do. There already is a homogenization of things that technology has facilitated from us. And what's so exciting are the people that are going to rise from that homogenization of AI, generative, digital. Gosh, same thing has happened in traditional art forms. The people that will rise as the ones that make the biggest impact, the biggest contributions, the biggest, excitement, the biggest, the strongest messaging, the most impactful messaging. Like, I think that people that rise from this will be the people that the AI could never replace. We all talk about, is AI going to replace our jobs? Like, I think there are some jobs that not be replaced, but could be facilitated so much by AI that it starts becoming possible for one human to manage the job of many instead of, I don't think we'll ever completely eliminate the human with AI. Or maybe not ever, anytime soon. But what happens through that homogenization is that people have to fight through the noise, and they have to fight so much harder. And so what comes through that noise ends up being so much more powerful and so much more impactful. And all it's doing, it's encouraging people to put their best work forward. One of my biggest inspirations of artists in the world once told me in thinking about art blocks and my concerns about making it an open platform versus a more exclusive kind of like best of the best type platform is, you're not encouraging artists to put their best work forward. You are not incentivizing people to make their best work. Homogenization and being okay with homogenization is not incentivizing people to do their best work. What's going to incentivize them is to differentiate themselves from everybody else. And that is something that will very much incentivize them to work harder. And AI is going to do that for us, as is generative distribution mechanisms, and as just like the advent of the NFT space.
Amazing. I love the optimistic outlook. And the last question is just, how are you defiant?
Oh man, I feel like I'm so stubborn and so focused. I don't know. I think maybe in this space I'm defiant in that I'm open to all of the things. I am putting myself in every single person's shoes and fighting for every single participant, no matter what, because everybody comes from a different place. And that seems to resonate very well with the people in our ecosystem, and in a way is defying the status quo of what Web3 is in terms of the dialogue and the divisiveness. And there's a lot of people like me in this space, and those are the people that are really pushing this forward. And I just, shout out to all those people.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This was so great. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.